Jerry and Charlie riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your fans. Now get up out your seat. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Shea Station.
Today is March 10th. We are rolling on with our Shea Station team profile and projection. Last time we did the outfield and the designated hitter spot. If you didn't listen to that, go listen to it. Today, we're doing the infield plus catcher position unit. It is a stacked unit with a lot of depth and a lot of talent on the New York Mets. As I said to you before, a lot of meat to chew on in this section of the Mets roster. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jack, aka Jolly. Joining me is Jerry Blevins. Jerry, how you doing?
I'm lovely. A lot of meat to chew on. I don't know what polar bear tastes like, but I imagine it's maybe a little gamey.
I think so too.
I don't want to try polar bear, I'll be honest.
It's an almost extinct race, Jerry. Come on.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Spare it from your diet for once. Yeah, I mean, the polar bear's back, which is good. I thought that was going to be something we'd have to talk about in this ep. We are missing a decent piece from last year's squad. Actually, the third most valuable member of the infield by WAR, Jose Iglesias. As of this recording, because we're recording this ahead of time, still unsigned, which is pretty remarkable. Jose Quintana went off the board yesterday to Milwaukee, but we're still waiting to see where Jose Iglesias is going to play in 2025. I don't think it's going to be the New York Mets because, as you're going to learn from this episode, if you don't know already, the Mets have a ton of options and a ton of competition going on in their infield with a lot of young players. It's going to be hard to figure out a spot for Jose Iglesias in the middle of all of that. But I think that's a good problem to have, Jerry. It's a good problem to have a bunch of major league depth and guys competing for bench spots on the major league roster. It puts yourself in a pretty good position.
I agree. I think I was a little bit shocked that his name never came up when Nick Madrigal got injured.
Yeah.
He was going to be kind of his replacement, but I think they have a good plan in place, and it seems to be that they're going to take these young guys, the Acuñas, the Beatties, even the Mauricios when he's fully healthy, and let them kind of get some playing time when they need to kind of fill that role. And I think that's a better approach for not only this team with the excitement that they could bring, because I don't think Iglesias can match what he did last year. You mentioned his value WAR. I guess I would say his value in the clubhouse was a greater, right, spark plug to this team. But I like letting your young guys get their feet wet in meaningful games in a supporting role. So,
yeah, it's a make or break year for some. It's an exciting year of potential forward momentum for others, and we're gonna go through all the ins and outs of that. Before we do, I want to shout out Field of Dreams Whiskey, once again, our presenting sponsor for all these team profile and projection episodes. If you missed last week's episode, don't worry. We're here to tell you all about it once again. It's whiskey from the most famous cornfield in the world. That's right, the cornfield in Iowa from the Field of Dreams movie, the one that you saw on your television screens a couple years ago in the Field of Dreams game, Yankees-White Sox, one of the better games in recent memory. It's brought to you by former major leaguers, which is probably the best part about the entire thing. It's made by baseball players for baseball fans, and also, if you're a baseball player, get some on your hands too, including Mets legend Jerry Blevins. As it says in my copy, very humble Jerry Blevins.
I wrote that.
They have two whiskeys available coming up in their upcoming batch, the Field of Dreams Small Batch Bourbon and the Field of Dreams Player Series Bourbon. It's available in stores throughout 10 states, but you can get your bottle delivered right to your door with the link in our description, drinkfieldofdreams.com/Shea. That's right, Shea of Shea Station. Hard to mess that one up, guys. I trust you. I think you can click that link or type it in. I believe in you. It's a wonderful product. If you want to get your Father's Day gift or your Mother's Day gift done early, I think this is a great gift idea. We had a lot of this batch come to our office last year. It went out quick, let me tell you. So get your hands on some this year because I guarantee you it's going to fly off the shelves. Drinkfieldofdreams.com/Shea. They are the best. And they're brought to us by our co-host, Jerry Blevins.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it. Let's dive in, man.
Let's get the frick into this, man.
This infield.
I mean, there's only one place to start, right?
You want to start right at shortstop? Is that where
Oh,
you're
I was
talking
thinking
about?
Luis Torrens. No, what were you thinking? What are you talking about? Yes, I am talking
I'm for
about
that.
the shortstop, potentially maybe the next Mets captain, Francisco Lindor. He got the seal of approval from Johnny Franco, which is a pretty big deal. I'm not gonna lie.
Former captain,
Former captain.
himself, which is by all means having a pitcher and a reliever and a lefty be your
Hell yeah.
former captain. It makes sense to me. I thought you were going to say maybe the next MVP of the National League because I believe that he should have won it last year, to be honest. I know Shohei Ohtani is a transcendent star. 50-50 is unbelievable, but as we mentioned, he plays shortstop, Francisco Lindor, and he does it at a Gold Glove caliber. The guy ranks unbelievably on defense, not to mention he's a 30-30 guy offensively. Just an overall spectacular player.
Yeah, really came alive after that slow start that had all the wrong headlines attached to him. He finishes the year with 33 home runs, 91 RBIs, 29 stolen bases, and an 8 WAR campaign, which was sixth in MLB and third among shortstops. Because right now, shortstop is probably the biggest depth of talent in baseball with Ellie De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr. Francisco Lindor is right up there with all of them. He was 14th in MLB with his home run mark, top 20 for both slugging and OPS, and fifth in MLB for outs above average. He was as well-rounded as it gets, as clutch as it gets in the playoffs. Just a dream year, 4 years in the making for Mets fans as we waited for the ascendance of both the play on the field and the maturity off the field of Francisco Lindor. It all came together last year. He led the charge, and now he's got a big bat in the lineup that's going to hit right behind him for all 162, and that's going to be Juan Soto. So very excited to see what Lindor does with a little bit more protection potentially in this lineup, but I have no doubts
A
that
lot more, I
he's
think
going to
it's safe to
steady the
say.
momentum, yeah, and potentially compete for that MVP. It would be nice to see him finally win one. See a Met
I
finally
would
win
love.
one.
Well, I mean, to have your 1-2 hitters in your lineup finish top five or at least top 10 in MVP voting is kind of what you're hoping for out of these two. That's what they're getting paid to do. Um, and that's who they are, to be honest. Francisco Lindor really stepped up, not just early enough when he moved into that leadoff spot, but it seems his leadership role, the mention of the captaincy, is a big deal because the way he led the team away from the field, I think, is the key to this whole thing. His maturity, the way he's evolving as a player, it's everything you want to see from a leader like that. And I think he's the real deal. I think we're going to see him do something similar to last year. So I'm excited to watch him play.
On the fast track to becoming the best shortstop in franchise history, and I can't wait to see what's in store in 2025. Unfortunately, because of how good he is, the discussion is kind of brief on him. Like, we know who the shortstop is, we know how good he's going to be. A large portion of this discussion is going to go everywhere else on the field, and I think we'll just go over who's playing where, what's projected, and then we'll kind of tackle player by player. Francisco Alvarez is going to get starting catching duties. He's slotted to bat seventh on a day-to-day basis. Age 23 season for him. It feels like he's been up a while at this point, but he's still a baby. First base, Pete Alonso. Welcome back home. $30 million year, $24 million option for next year. We'll see, but for now, Pete Alonso is a Met. He's been hitting balls hard in spring training. It is wonderful to see. Second base, going to be very interesting this year. Right now, it's Jeff McNeil, but there's about 3 to 4 other guys it could be throughout the course of the entire season. There's going to be a lot of competition at second base. Third base looks to be solidified as our guy, Mark Vientos, who came alive last year with a 27 home run campaign, hit some big playoff home runs, 5 total, in quite the coming out party for the former second round pick. So a lot of talent in this infield, a lot of options in the depth chart. Where do you want to go first, Jerry Blevins?
I kind of want to talk about Jeff McNeil a little bit. You mentioned there's some competition. I don't see it as such. I
Oh,
think he's the guy at the beginning because he had such a great run in the second half of last year when he made those swing adjustments. He really changed his season around. You saw it right before the break. He started to hit the ball hard. And for me, he's the guy. And he's kind of, we talked Nimmo so much in the outfield. I think McNeil has a chance to bring this unit of the infield to a higher level, simply because of what he's capable of doing. Not many guys can do what he does. Bat to ball skills, moving the ball around the field. Offensively, he's just style wise. If he's where he needs to be, where we saw him at the in the second half of last year, this guy is a difference maker. The reason why they signed him to that deal, um, I think he's a key piece of this whole where they end up going forward.
I agree. I mean, I put this stat on the sheet because it really opened my eyeballs a little bit. He had a 156 OPS plus in the second half. That was a top 15 mark in MLB, second among all MLB second basemen. As soon as that longer, quicker swing came into the fold with the new bat speed metrics that went live on Savant last year, it felt like something switched for Jeff McNeil. And we've seen these ebbs and flows throughout his entire career, but it is very easy to forget that this was the most valuable player on the 2022 Mets, a team that won 101 games. Jeff McNeil is the first face you see on that baseball reference page, and it's because he was absolutely spectacular that year. You look at his baseball card, and it's so odd year, even year, that it almost feels like he's under some kind of curse. But we really began to see him take form last year in the second half. It's just such a shame that that right wrist fracture derailed the end of his season. It was kind of I believe he stayed in the game when it happened, and then Mendoza announced the next day, yeah, he's going to be out for 2 months and each surgery, all that stuff. It kind of happened just like that. And that's how we got introductions to Luis Angel Acuna and some other guys as depth pieces, because we needed guys to step up in their wake. McNeil's one of the most interesting cases on this team. If someone steps up and seizes that second base job from him, there's still a role for him in many other ways. He can play 4 different positions pretty well. He makes for a super utility kind of guy, but I think that's not what the Mets have in mind for him. I agree with you. I think that they want him to have this job. They want him to take this job and run with it. But I'll come at you a little bit, because I do think they are entertaining the competition here. We've seen some impressive stuff from Luis Angel Acuna in some very small samples, and he's been getting some run in spring training. Brett Beatty's been taking reps everywhere. I'm sure there's some kind of plan for him. He's competing for a spot on that opening day roster. But yes, I do fully agree that Jeff McNeil, it is his job to lose at this point.
Yeah, I think the Jeff McNeil that we saw in the second half, he played 41 games in the second half versus 88 in the first half. He hit 14 doubles in 88 games. He's a doubles guy. He's going to run into some home runs. We've seen that short porch. He's able to get to the upper deck quite easily at home. But 88 games, 14 doubles. For me, he's a doubles guy. In the second half last year in 41 games, he hit 12 doubles. I mean, that to me is the key to him. And it's a little bit of a misnomer to say longer, quicker type of swing. But the truth is his bat path is longer. It stays through the zone a little bit longer, not a little bit, quite a bit longer to be able to make contact solidly with the ball. And he sped the way he swings, the power with which he exerts in that swing. That's why it's faster. So that combination to me just makes so much sense. I think he is in for a big year. And like you said, competition wise, if he's not that player that we saw in the second half, that's where the competition shows up, because they need some type of offensive production, and they will move on and push him into that super utility role pretty quickly if he starts the year off in a slump.
Yeah, the bar has been raised for the Mets offense, certainly. And I do think that slap hitting version of Jeff McNeil that I absolutely loved to watch 2 years ago, I think it's dead and gone, man. Because
RIP.
Yeah, I think there's no way for that to be productive at the major league level.
That kind of stuff.
Exactly.
That's what he was really good at beating. And the game changed, and he has adapted. It showed it last year. He just needs to continue on that path.
Yes, you can't let the game pass you by. He was a unicorn in 2022. He was one of the few guys that could do that with ease, and that's what led him to that batting title. But times have changed, and Jeff McNeil is trying to change with it. So we commend him for that, and hopefully things click out.
Last thing before we move on.
Yeah, good.
The first half and second half, Jeff McNeil, I just want to reiterate some stats. He hit 216 in the first half, 289 in the second half.
Yeah.
His on-base percentage went up 100 points. But to me, this is where the double stuff comes in because he has to be a doubles hitter. 314 slugging percentage, which is absolutely atrocious
Yeah.
last year in the first half. In the second half, almost 550. I don't expect his number to be in the 500s, but in the high, like 450 up, that's where he needs to be. He needs to take that extra base. He needs to push a little bit. He needs to provide a little bit of thump, but more importantly, he needs to get on base for those guys at the top of the order.
Yeah, I mean that it was so nice when I think there was a spell where McNeil was hitting ninth at certain areas before he really, took charge of the batting title, and it was great having him just reset the lineup over and over and over again. He can be a true threat at the bottom of the lineup, especially with all the power we have in the middle now. But yeah, it's the slug there. I was going to say the exact same thing. I don't need Jeff McNeil to slug over 500. That's not like what he's there for. He's there to put the ball in play, hit for average, and collect those doubles. As you said, 39 doubles he had in 2022. And even in the down year last year, still 26 doubles in 129 games. That's evened out to a decent pace. I would have loved to see him get that full month of September to really round out his stats, because I do think he would have ended up turning in a pretty good year. But instead, we got some great play from Jose Iglesias, so all's well that ends well. I don't know about you, but I think Mark Vientos is probably the logical next point of discussion here, because obviously he was terrific last year, but he does still feel like a wild card just in the slightest bit to me because of sophomore slumps and all that stuff. But it is safe to say that the third base job is fully his at this point. There is no more competition between him and Brett Beatty. Mark Vientos is the third baseman of the New York Mets. And in limited time last year, because he did miss, the first 2 months of the season, basically, he still finished top 15 in MLB for slugging with a 516 clip. And he was third among all MLB third basemen in slugging, OPS, and weighted runs created plus, trailing only really Rafael Devers at the top there. So a really excellent year for Mark Vientos. Everyone's going to remember those big postseason hits that he got against Philly and LA. There is still a defensive question here. There was thought that maybe Vientos could become the first baseman of the team if the Pete Alonso situation did not resolve itself. Now we don't really need to think about that, and the corners look pretty solid offensively. There might be some question marks defensively, but still, I think you're feeling pretty good about Mark Vientos going into this year. He is projected to be the third most valuable infielder on the Mets going into the next season. Francisco Alvarez sitting above him. Steamer has some high hopes for him. We'll get to him in a little bit, but what are your thoughts on Mark Vientos?
I think he nailed it. Vientos, one of the breakout stars in MLB last year. The question is, can he maintain that? And I think a lot of the signs point to yes, mostly because it was a prolonged breakout. It wasn't just, a month long. Pitchers made adjustments. His strikeout totals went up a little bit, but then he made it a pretty quick adjustment. He provided power even when the strikeouts went up, because that's how people are going to pitch him now. From a pitcher standpoint, you understand the threat that he is at the plate. He's going to drive the ball out of the ballpark, so you want to make him swing and miss, chase balls, and he did a little bit more of that, but more importantly, his power maintained there. When he made contact, he made big contact. The conversation that he had, Todd Zeal did a short on SNY. You can look it up on the YouTube channel, whatever you need. He talked to him, and last year in Philly, he was approached by a guy named Bryce Harper. And Bryce Harper said, "Man, I love your swing. I love what you're doing." And Vientos was like, "Oh, man, Bryce Harper's talking to me. This is awesome. He likes my swing." But then he dropped a little piece of knowledge, which, Philly fans might not appreciate, but he told him that he doesn't have to swing that hard. And he had heard that from a ton of other people, including JD Martinez. But I think hearing it from a competitor, a contemporary like Bryce Harper, I think he took it to heart, and understanding that he doesn't have to hit 600-foot home runs. He doesn't need to try to hit home runs. He's going to run into those. I think that really helped him solidify who he is at the plate. I think the strikeouts will still be there, but when you provide power like he does, I am okay with the strikeouts. I think his establishment as a true power threat. We talked about McNeil being that 500 slug. That's what we need from Mark Vientos. We do need him to be in that 500 slug percentage area, and I think he will provide it. I'm super excited. He's such a fun guy to follow. You want to come say hi? You got chocolate croissant? Come say hi to Jolly in there.
Cameo.
Oh, you want to offer me? No, I want you to have. He's got a
Aw,
chocolate croissant.
what a gentleman sharing with dad.
Look at this hair right now.
I know, right? Look at that mane. If you're not watching on YouTube, guys, you're just missing out.
You're missing out. This is Asher. This is my 5-year-old. Say hi.
God, he's 5. Hi, Asher.
Hi. Hey, you wanted to give me some of that chocolate croissant? I know how much you love those.
Yeah, Jerry, why don't you snack while I do some Mark Vientos chatting here?
Hey, can I send you back upstairs with mommy? I'm doing some work.
You were starting to nail it on the head a little bit there because you were saying that Mark Vientos doesn't need to swing hard. I think one thing I really want to see from Mark Vientos this year is more of the same with where his balls ended up. If you look at his spray chart on Baseball Savant, it's pretty.
Beautiful.
Like nearly half of his home runs went to center or opposite field. The league rate for pull percentage last year was 40.6%. Mark Vientos, even after smacking 27 home runs with that mighty swing, only went to his pull side 29% of the time. He's an all fields hitter, and he's strong enough to still hit balls out of the ballpark by doing that. So I don't want to see him become this pull happy guy, which could lead to more strikeouts, because I do think the raw power is all there for him. And I really like the Bryce Harper anecdote. It's one of the things that Keith says all the time whenever Mark is up to bat. It's just, he wants to see him go oppo. It's something he said a long time with Pete too, but I think Pete has become this all pull power hitter. With Mark, I think the sky's the limit if he maintains his ability to go to the opposite field and still hit the ball with authority. But yeah, he's going to need to be in that 500 slug clip like you mentioned, because there are those defensive limitations. He was -7 outs above average last year, which was 4th worst among third basemen. And it didn't look like it, especially towards the end of the season. You saw some flashier plays, and it's something that he takes a lot of pride in. He said he didn't really want to move off third base, but he would if the team needed him to. I do think you're going to see a better year from him, because I just think the guy is dedicated to his craft, and you're going to see more results because he's starting to see the results on the field now.
Yeah, from the defensive side, the biggest hole I saw was him coming in on the ball, charging. A guy that size, it's hard for him to get moving, but he made some real adjustments on being able to come in on the ball. I don't think he's ever going to be a Gold Glove caliber third baseman, but if he can be okay over there, league average, maybe slightly below, as long as he's hitting the ball out of the ballpark, I think it's a wash.
Asher, do you have any thoughts? So yeah, that's pretty much the whole spiel on Mark Vientos. Excited to see him hit in the middle of this stacked lineup. And this lineup gets a lot more comfortable to look at because Pete Alonso is back in the fold on the other side of the diamond. Coming off what we all thought was a little bit of a down year by his standards, he still led all primary first basemen in home runs with 34. He's capable of more, and we kind of know the story with Pete Alonso at this point. You can pencil in at least 30 home runs. You can pencil in, around league average defense, a lot of RBIs, and some clutch hitting as well. Hopefully will come with that this year too. And we're on the fast track to breaking the Mets franchise home run record. It's probably going to happen sometime in July or August this year if he follows his usual pace, which he's done every full season of his career. Just a relief to see Pete Alonso in the blue and orange and not some other uniform during the spring so far.
Yeah, I don't think we need to dive into the Mets legacy kind of thing. I know the home run record means a lot to him. It means a lot to fans. I think he's well deserving. I think he would have already had it had the COVID season and 60 games not been there. But his importance to this lineup, I don't think can be overstated. He provides the power that they need. And when we were talking when they first signed how much they needed him, it was kind of like we had tried to trick ourselves into being okay if he doesn't sign and goes elsewhere. But the truth is, he is the heart of this lineup in that cleanup spot, or 3-hole, wherever he needs to be. And I expect him to have a better year than he had last year. He's going to need that. I mean, the fact that what he hit 220.
I think 240, 217 the year before though.
Yeah, I think 217 the year before. So he'd been on a 2-year downturn as far as putting the ball in play. He was chasing a lot more. We saw him take just terrible swings, look lost at the plate for longer stretches last year. I truly expect him to round back into form and climb back into that 500. I mean, his slugging percentage career-wise is over 500.
Wild.
He was at 459 last year. I expect him to get back into that because that's really what we need. 34 home runs is good, It's not what Pete brings to the table. I think 40 is the benchmark for him. RBI in triple digits. He only ended up with 88 last year. Um, that's what I want to see from him. That's what I expect from him. And that's, that's the style of play and the performance that the Mets need from him and if they want to win a World Series here.
Yeah, the pressure kind of goes back on Pete for what is going to be kind of a second straight contract year for him if he does plan to opt out. There are some stuff under the hood that you're not going to like to see. The strikeout percentage reached 25% last year. That was the highest since his rookie year back in 2019. His ground ball rate was the highest of his career, 42%, even higher than his rookie year. So there's some evening out that needs to happen. You mentioned the whiffs. There was a lot of ugly swings midseason and a lot of pulling from Pete Alonso, but I do still believe that you know pretty much what you're going to get with him, and you hope that he can use all fields and hit for a little bit of better average because everything ticks up when he's able to do that. But first base is his gig, no question there. I think there's a lot more to explore with the kid behind the backstop who showed up to spring training with a new batting stance, which has thrown me for a little bit of a loop. Francisco Alvarez has, of course, the keys to the catching job. There's still a lot of high hopes for him in what is now going to be his third full season as a big leaguer. We saw a glimpse of it in 2023, the 25 homer season. A lot of ebbs and flows throughout that, but still the counting stats are around the areas you like. We saw a pretty deep slump in the middle of last year. He came alive towards the end in September, but what I'm looking for this year, most of all for Francisco Alvarez, consistency. I just need to see the same guy every month, a steady Eddie in the middle of the lineup, because I think if you can get that out of him, you're going to see his best season yet.
Yeah, to me, he's the candidate to have a Mark Vientos breakout.
Yeah.
Francisco Alvarez, I've been expecting it any time now because he has so many of the tools that you need to be an offensive style catcher. What he brings to the plate is valuable regardless, behind the plate mostly. He's a very good pitch caller, a good receiver. He did go through what I would call maturity issues. I mean, at his age, 22 season.
Yeah.
He allowed himself what was happening when he was hitting to carry over a little bit at the behind the plate, with some pass balls, some errant throws, some just boneheaded plays when there's a runner on third base to allow guys to score, not blocking balls up. I just expect him to take another level up. He has 40 home run potential. I just want to see him, just like you said, be more consistent. Don't let the lulls drag you down. He tore that UCL in his thumb, and that really zapped his power, and I think it zapped his confidence. He's had a few of these injuries creep up on him every year, but it seems like this will be the Mets breakout star of the 25 season.
I think that's what they're hoping for too. You mentioned the thumb injury. It's easy to forget that because it happened, I think, in April, pretty early in the season in LA. And Alvarez, I think, played with that ailment for most of the season, even when he came back, quote unquote, healthy. But you do see it in his batted ball profile. His 52% ground ball rate was the top 20 mark in MLB, and he's alongside some names that you wouldn't expect him to be alongside. You know, the guys like Bryce Terang, Ke'Bryan Hayes, some of the more like slap hitting, light hitting contact guys of the game. You expect the pop from Francisco Alvarez, and you go back and you look at his highlights so far in his career, it's been big time home runs. I do still believe that he very much is capable of that. But yeah, it's confidence issues, it's maturity issues, but he gets to kind of, I don't want to say fade into the background, but, you know, he's not the centerpiece of this offense anymore. At least he's not profiled to be as of the recording of this video. He's slated to be the seventh hitter in the everyday lineup, and I think that's perfectly fine for Francisco Alvarez. You know, be the power guy at the bottom of the lineup alongside Jeff McNeil, who's going to get on base for you, and I think we'll see some great things out of Alvarez, and Fangraphs certainly thinks so. He's the second highest projected WAR at 3.5 for the upcoming season. They think he's going to have a 21 homer campaign. The walk rate's going to go up. The strikeout rate's going to go down. A lot of numbers to like on Francisco Alvarez because 23, that's still a very young age to break out, baby.
It really is. Like the fact that he's so young still is kind of baffling because we've seen him for so long. But like you mentioned, he needs to find some consistency at the plate, but I truly think that even if he has a similar year offensively to last year, what he brings to the plate defensively, I think, is the key there. He's a great framer. He's got really quick feet for a guy built like he is. And I think he'll be better throwing runners out this year. I think he's just sharpening up his skills, something that takes time. It's hard to play in the big leagues. Baseball's a different sport. You learn a lot of techniques. I think he's good to climb defensively as well up the ranks, as far as blocking, throwing, all the defensive metrics of catching. I'm expecting a breakout year offensively and defensively from Francisco Alvarez.
Yeah, it's not quite make or break, but it is a year to start showing some steps in the right direction. Because you go to his baseball savant, and if you're a blue and red circles guy, there's not a lot to look at here. But defense does love him a lot. He was 88th percentile in framing, 83rd percentile in pop time. That's what you like out of your backstop guys that are able to get the ball out of their hands quick and steal strikes when they can. So if nothing else, you get that behind the plate with Francisco Alvarez and also his backup, Luis Torrens, who was a pleasant surprise for the Mets last year, a valuable contributor. So that's the around the horn. And I'm following the roster resource here as pretty accurately. I think we're going to have, obviously, a backup catcher. That's Luis Torrens. I think we're going to have Starling Marte on the bench as the lefty DH. And then we're going to have Tyrone Taylor as sort of the fourth outfielder who can play all positions. That leaves one spot on the bench for a utility player. And the Mets have a plethora of options for this spot. And that's kind of where I want to wrap our discussion today, because in my mind, there's three different dudes that could feasibly end up with this spot. Right now, Fangraphs thinks that it will be Luis Angel Acuna, who came up in September for Francisco Lindor's back injury. I personally wasn't expecting too much out of him. He didn't have great numbers at AAA. He was having a pretty tough year altogether. He came up and his hair was absolutely on fire for those 20 games that he played. He looked like the real deal prospect that we got in that Scherzer trade, and people were very excited about him. 14 games, a 966 OPS. He ended up making the playoff roster because of those efforts. But behind him, Ronnie Mauricio, coming off a torn ACL, missing I think all of the 2024 season. So no development there, but he's competing. And then Brett Beatty, who seems to be taking reps at every position possible, left field, second base, shortstop, third base, in an effort to try and win that bench spot as well. So three guys that this could end up being if it's not going to be Jose Iglesias, which it kind of looks like it's not going to be at this point. Do any one of them stand out a little bit more to you than the others?
I think Acuna has the job because he has the versatility defensively. He can play. Beatty's always been a questionable glove. But Beatty's, to his advantage, he bats left-handed. And they've given him extended looks throughout. This is a make or break year. We talked about it with Alvarez. This is truly a make or break year with Brett Beatty as far as where his ceiling is with the New York Mets, because they don't have time to wait to let a guy develop at the big league level. He's going to run out of options. He's going to eventually have to either be in the big leagues or go to another team. And he is running out of time. I still think he could have a great career. I'm just not so sure it's going to be with the New York Mets, unless he really steps up this year in a limited role and forces his way into the lineup. But the name that stands out to me is Ronnie Mauricio. I love Ronnie Mauricio, the prospect. It was unfortunate that he tore his knee up going into the year last year. I love what he brings, and the ability to swing the bat from the left side is a key. I'm a big fan of Ronnie Mauricio. I think he's going to make an impact, and I think the Mets love him. He's not as touted. He kind of gets to be the forgotten guy for some reason all the time. Yeah. He's always the last name mentioned. But I love what he brings to the table. He's got power. He's got speed. If that knee is healthy, he'll be able to do some things. So he's something that I think he's going to be a major contributor in at least one piece of the season at some point, because you need depth in 162 games. But I love him as a prospect.
The last we saw of Ronnie Mauricio was in the winter of 2023 going into 2024, where he played in Lidom in the Dominican Republic and had an OPS of 1,200 in 8 games, which is pretty darn good. He's got that exciting Ellie De La Cruz, O'Neal Cruz type athleticism type build. We saw it for a little bit in 2023 towards the end. Some of the balls that he hit flew off the bat. And you mentioned that time's running out for Brett Baty. Ronnie Mauricio and Luis Angel Acuna both have age on their side. Angel Acuna is going to be 23, Mauricio 24, Baty 25. Those years, it might not seem, consequential, but those things adds up when it comes to options and how much time you're going to give a guy to develop.
Man.
Exactly. Yeah, he's an old guy at this point, right? You might have to give him a cane or something. But Mauricio, I do think he is the slimmest chance to make the team on opening day, barring any injuries, just because he never really got the seasoning last year at AAA. He feels like a logical fit to just start the year there. He had a full season at AAA in 2023, 116 games and 852 OPS. I do think he might spend the first month there just to get his feet back under him and not get rushed back to the big leagues. But I do agree, the Mets are likely very excited about him. He can play second, third, and short. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's got the left-handed bat, like you mentioned before, and he's the type of guy that you feel like his ceiling is the highest. I don't know why. Maybe it's just like a vibes thing, but I've always felt like Ronnie Mauricio, his ceiling was the highest of these three options. I will give credit to Brett Baty because this is a guy who long time thought he was going to be the future third baseman of the New York Mets and is now taking initiative to try and become a utility player, to make the team, to get into the major leagues and make a name for himself. So I give him credit there, and he's hit some balls pretty hard in spring training, which we've seen this before with Brett Baty, and I'm allowing myself to get fooled a little bit again, but his swing does look good. And we said it at the top of the episode, but depth is great. Depth is a good thing. You want a three-man position battle for a bench spot because that means that your team's offensive roster is a very good position. So whatever happens with Jeff McNeil, whatever happens with any of these three young guys, there's going to be playing time to go around, and it's going to be up to these guys to seize it. But it's very good to see Ronnie Mauricio back in the fold. The Mets infield, I'd say, is probably the most impressive unit on the entire roster, and that's why this was a really fun episode to do because it starts with the de facto captain, MVP runner-up, and ends with three promising young guys fighting for a bench role. So if nothing else, the Mets offense will be powered through these guys. I think that pretty much does it for the whole conversation, though, unless you got anything else on Luis Torrens. I just
kind of want to quickly run through the division and where they kind of
absolutely.
Rank. Yeah, so the Braves, obviously, with Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, and then they get a little thin. You got Orlando Arcia at short, and Sean Murphy's down a couple of months.
Yeah.
He had some cracked ribs, which are no joke. They run a little thin, so I think I would take the Mets over them. Then you got the Phillies with Bryce Harper, Bryson Stott, Alec Boehm, Trey Turner, and JT Realmuto. That is a powerful group of infielders. They're going to do some damage. I think I would still lean Mets maybe there, simply with, youth and what they have depth-wise. Washington's got some exciting prospects. They've got some good, and then Miami is Miami right now in rebuilding phase. Even though I'm a huge Xavier Edwards fan, but I just feel like the Mets are a top 3 infield in the league, top 5 for sure. If you look at the Dodgers, you look at the Orioles, what they bring to the table. This to me is the best of the best on the Mets roster.
This unit has really taken form. I mean, in terms of in-division stuff, for me, I got to see what Trey Turner is this year. Like, is he all bad at this point? Or are they going to move him off shortstop? We'll see about that. A guy like Bryson Stott doesn't jump off the page name-wise. He was still a 3-WAR player last year. They have a really well-rounded unit. Alec Boehm, not so sure, but when you have Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto, I think I still like that Phillies infield as probably the most well-rounded unit. But in terms of ceiling, I think we're going to see a better year from McNeil. I think we're going to see better and better years from Mark Vientos down the line, and then of course Francisco Lindor. It feels like the sky's the limit right now, coming off one of his best seasons. The Braves, they get dinged for me for Arcia at short. That's a pretty glaring weakness on an otherwise really potent lineup. He does feel like the weak cog in the engine there, and then them losing Sean Murphy for 4 to 6 weeks with that cracked rib after he came off such a down year. They're looking a little vulnerable right now, looking in their lineup and both their rotation, but it's something about that Braves uniform that still gets all my respect. It's going to be theirs till they lose it, So
agreed.
But it's nice to have this conversation because I feel like even a year ago at this point, this was not a conversation at all. It was very clearly the Braves and Phillies infield units and just lineups in general over the New York Mets. But that's all that can change in a year, you know? You just need a couple things to click right, a couple prospects to pan out, and suddenly you're potentially looking at one of the best infields, not only in the National League, but in all of baseball.
Agreed.
Pretty exciting stuff, my guy. So I think we've tackled the offense at this point. That's it for our position players.
Now we're getting into my bread and butter next
Oh,
episode.
yeah.
We're talking rotation and bullpen. I mean, pitching is me. That's what I want to do.
Pitching is all. I'm just gonna let you talk for 40 minutes next week. I'll kick back, kick my feet up.
I'll hold you to that.
I'll let you ramble.
Talk.
Yeah, the rotation and bullpen is going to be interesting. A lot of bodies to talk about, some injuries to talk about already as well. So if you're interested in that, tune in next Monday because that'll be the third episode of our team profile and projection that we're doing all throughout March. We appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a review if you wouldn't mind because it does a lot for podcast apps. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next Monday. LFGM.
Let's go Mets.
Jerry and Charlie, Shea Station. Jerry and Charlie, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time where we'll be back.
Shea Station.